Okay, so now I'll start the first skill, right? Which is I call it identifying the correct topic and the correct concept. So previously, or what we've done in time practices and in WAs is that we tell you the topic to study, right? So for example, for a certain time practice, we'll tell you, A, it's about market failure, and then for next time practice, we'll tell you, A, it's on book 6 or book 5, you know. So there's no need for you to do any kind of processing, right? But in the upcoming promos and in your prelims as well as your A levels, the job is actually on you to identify what topic this particular essay question comes from, lah, right? And so that is a skill that's quite important. Okay, so this second part of the ESLs, I want to talk about identifying the correct concepts and topics. Okay, okay. So the first thing I want to say is that sometimes the topics and the concepts are very obvious. In that case, good for you. It's very easy, right? So for example, look at this question. It says, hey, using relevant examples, can you please distinguish between PED and XED, right? So you say, okay, this is 10 marks. 10 marks is 10 plus 0. There are two requirements for the 10 marks, R1 and R2. This very clearly, this is PED and this is XED, lah. Right, so this comes from the demand supply book. Okay, so sometimes the topics and the concepts are also quite obvious, right? The question just screams at you, hey, this is this topic, so there's no need to do any kind of processing, right? In other times, you must look at the keywords and you must infer. Okay, so this is a little bit more tricky, right? So this one, they give you a lot of information, right? And they tell you, hey, using the information provided, can you please tell me why governments intervene in the market for e-cigarettes, right? So then you read all this and you say, hey, e-cigarettes have ultra-fine particles, right? They increase the risk of cardiovascular disease among secondhand smokers. So from this, then you say, okay, you infer and you say, okay, this is a market failure question, right? So for someone that hasn't studied market failure, he or she wouldn't know that this is market failure thing, lah, right? So again, 10 marks, R1 and R2. So because there are two requirements, you need to tell me two reasons why governments intervene. So R1 will be ultrafine particles here, so this is negative externalities. And then the second reason why people intervene is also something that you have to infer, right? What's the most probable market failure? And that's actually imperfect information. So people who vape are typically the younger population, so they don't care about like the bad stuff about vaping to their own health. They only focus on peer acceptance and looking cool and so forth. So then the MPP perceived is higher than MPP actual. Okay, so this one you need to look at keywords and you infer. So what's the keyword here? Keyword here is actually government intervention. That why governments intervene is because the market fails. And what kind of, other keywords I'm looking at is secondhand smokers, which are third parties, of course. Okay. Well, at this point I want to say this, right? That this is actually a tutorial question, but it's incidentally also a promo question. So we extracted the promo question and placed it in the tutorial for you. Okay, so obviously when you read this, then you'll be like, yeah, this is so obvious. Why do I need to learn this? Then in that case, good for you, because you studied to the point where this becomes kind of like second nature. Okay, which is great. Okay, I want to move on to something a little bit more tricky, right? So this is the WA1, the WA1. I think it's WA1 question, right? So they ask you for possible reasons for the sharp rise in the price of oil. So if you remember this, right, you will know that because it's prices, then it's basically a demand supply question, lah. So the reason why there's a rise in the price of oil is because demand is rising and supply is falling, right? So then you see A list looks fine, R1 and R2. But if you go about it in this way, you won't get full marks, right? And the reason why is because there's another keyword you need to take note of, which is the word sharp, right? So where in the previous example here, it was so obvious, right? The two market failures are the and the. But for some cases, they are quite tricky, right? So in this case, the word sharp means you need to talk about magnitude. And where there's a need to talk about magnitude, you need to bring in elasticities, right? Which is PED, PES, XED, or YED. So there's this another layer of processing, right? And then after you do that, you have to decide which is the correct elasticity to use, which again is not easy. So if your content is strong, then you will know that when demand increases, is the slope of the opposing curve that matters. It's the slope of the opposing curve that matters. So demand should be paired with PS, and supply should be paired with PD. Right. So when you read the price of oil, you infer these things, right? Demand and supply. You know it's a TDSS question, but from the word sharp, you infer that you actually need PD and PS. Okay. So when you identify when you read the question very, very closely. Okay. Sometimes words like this can suggest the need for certain concepts. Okay. So this is something that you've done before, right? So no problem. What about other situations? Are there other situations where this is required? Okay. So this is a promo question. So you can go to find which year it's from. I have not placed it here because I don't want my slides to be too cumbersome, right? So again, 10 marks is 10 plus 0. Your job is to identify two requirements. Okay, they say using ADAS analysis, explain how a rise in investment expenditure can bring about economic growth. Explain how a rise in investment expenditure can bring about economic growth. Okay, so if you're like me, you'll realize the R1, R2 isn't very obvious. You compare it to, if you compare it to this question, the R1, R2 screams at you, right? This question is not like that, right? So actually, your starting point is investment expenditure, your ending point is economic growth. In order for you to have two requirements, there must be two arrows, right? They ask you how a rise in investment expenditure can lead you to arrive at this. The only way for you to have 2 points is that there are two pathways, right? And so the first pathway is when there's an increase in I, it increases AD, and it leads to actual growth. The second pathway is that when there's an increase in I, it increases AS and leads to potential growth. So this one is not that obvious. Okay, so you must know that there are two types of economic growth, which is actual growth and potential growth, in order for you to realize that there are two pathways. Okay, so what's the keyword here? I guess the keyword here is economic growth. But unlike here where the sharp tells you that there are two pathways, the way you find that there are two paths, that nothing in this black color question suggests that there are two pathways. The only thing that suggests there are two pathways is that you know on your own that a 10-mark question has R1, R2. And then your job is to try and find two pathways. Okay. You must try and find two, because if you only write one, we can only credit you for one pathway. Okay. So second point. Second thing I want to talk about in this SRS is so your job is to try and identify two requirements for A and two requirements for B lah. Okay. Sometimes the requirements are very obvious, like the XED and PED question, but sometimes they are not, right? And in that case, you have to either look at keywords. You hope that there are keywords there to prompt you to highlight to you what kind of concepts you need, right? Otherwise, you have to infer and deduce, meaning that you know that if there's increase in I need to get to EG, because there are R1, R2s, that I need to find out two arrows. And then if you can only figure out one, you slow down and you try to figure out what the other one is. Okay, so for requirement identification, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not.